I love saving money, and I also love starting a project the minute creativity strikes, when I can just go to my yarn stash and pull out some yarn and start working right away. Today, I'd like to talk to you about some mistakes I have made while building my yarn stash, and if I was building my yarn stash today, what I'd do differently. If you're looking to build your yarn stash, or if you're looking at your yarn stash and feeling like it doesn't really represent you, I would love to talk to you today. Now, a lot of the mistakes I have made all boil down to trying to save money and trying to get yarn as inexpensively as possible. That's still my goal, is to be able to get as much yarn as I can for the least amount of money. It's definitely still my goal. But there's definitely some things along the way that I would change up. The biggest mistake I made is buying yarn because it was cheap and I wasn't purchasing with a purpose in mind. I think a lot of this goes back to when I very first started crocheting, and I am the type of person who becomes like hyper fixated. I get so interested in something, it just like, I want to know all the skills right away, and I want to have all the fun stuff, and I just want to be like a hardcore crocheter overnight. And so I had a friend that was teaching me some basic crochet stitches, but a lot of what I was learning was online. And a lot of how I was learning about yarn, like different weights of yarn, different fibers of yarn, what to use them for, was by watching yarn hauls. So because I wasn't purchasing yarn with a purpose, I was easily swayed by any yarn hauls I saw, by any sales, any clearance. I was just trying to find as much yarn as I could, as fast as I could. And going back, what I would do differently if I was starting like at ground zero, like literally no yarn at all, is I would give myself permission to spend more money per project until I figure out the types of crochet I really like to do. I was basing a lot of the decisions I was making on yarn and what was good yarn or what I thought I'd be using based on yarn hauls of other people. And as we all know, like you can enjoy seeing something, you can enjoy, like I love seeing some of my crochet friends making amigurumis and posting about those, but I've come to realize I don't like making them. And, you know, if I was buying a bunch of yarn that would be really great for those, that would be like a really bad thing for me to spend my money on, because that yarn is never going to get used. I would really give myself permission to find a project I like, go out and buy just enough yarn for that project, do the project, see if it's something I want to enjoy, try another project, and keep doing that until I really narrowed down what it was I like to make. I think that's really important. Like if you are a thrifty person like myself, if you enjoy saving money, you need to be okay with spending a little more per project until you really know what you're going to be making the most out of. Since we're talking about yarn hauls, I found them very helpful in the beginning to learn about different types of yarn, but it did create that FOMO, that fear of missing out. And I do know, like I would see some different YouTubers post ones of new yarns at Joann or whatever, and I felt like I needed to rush there and get this yarn because I didn't really realize in the beginning how often these companies are coming out with new yarn. There's always a new yarn. There literally always is. So there's always going to be something new, and you don't have to rush out and get those just because one of your favorite YouTubers says that there's something new, because that does fall in a lot with my last point. And that is, you know, if you don't know what you like to make and what you want to work with, having the newest of something really doesn't make any difference, because everything is going to be new to you. You know, if you're brand new to crochet, every yarn is a new yarn, even if it's been out 20 years. I don't know if there's yarn that's out 20 years. I'm assuming assuming Super Saver has been out 20 years. And this leads into another mistake that I made in the beginning. That was honestly believing that these yarn companies only had sales once in a while. I thought that a yarn sale was a lot bigger deal than it was, and I thought, kind of with the FOMO, that fear of missing out, that then I would have to pay more for yarn. Since then, I've gotten a much better grip on how often sales happen, and if I was building my yarn stash today, I would take the time and not rush, let sales happen, watch them, and get a baseline for what the regular prices on yarn is, and then what the sale prices on yarn is. If you are a person who shops at Hobby Lobby, it's like every other week or every 2 weeks, something like that, that the yarn is on sale 30%. In my mind, I'm never going to buy full price yarn there. I will just always wait until that sale price. But if you don't know the difference and you walk in and you see 30% off yarn, you might think that that's a limited time opportunity, and it is just not. I've also noticed on Joann's, I have the app on my phone, and a lot of times, those same yarns are on sale over and over, and you can look at them and know, like, I happen to know, their big twist routinely goes on sale for $2.99, and the lowest I've really seen it is like a $2.59, $2.79, but by watching those sales and not getting drawn into purchasing, you can really know like what a stock up price is, and then take advantage of it when it does hit that lowest possible price. Because there have been sales where I've literally seen it's only 10 cents cheaper than the regular price, but they're touting it as a sale. I would take my time, learn the prices, and don't believe that every sale is a sale. But also know the prices well enough to know when a good stock up price is. Another mistake I made in the beginning, before I really knew what I wanted to get into crocheting, was I thought that I needed a well-rounded yarn stash. I have referred to, and I have heard other people refer to, your yarn stash as being very similar to your food pantry, in which case you would want a well-rounded food pantry. But what I have realized is that does not apply with my yarn. When I came across sales and clearance sales and stuff like that, I was looking at it from the aspect of I needed to have kind of the variety of a whole yarn store, in my closet. And I know I can't be the only one who's done this. But I honestly thought, okay, I need neutrals. I need these neutrals in a 4-weight, and I need them, in something else. And then I thought, okay, well, I might be making projects for kids, so I need some kid colored yarn, like bright colors or whatever. I thought, I need blanket yarn in here because a lot of crocheters use blanket yarn. And I think that was a big mistake on my part, because while it is nice to have variety, I have really found I don't crochet in a variety. I'm not trying to make like a well-balanced diet out of yarn like you do when you are putting food in your food pantry and you need a variety of different tastes and textures and nutrients. Yarn is not like that. I think it would be kind of like if you only ate steak, you would just put steaks in your freezer. And if you only eat cornflakes for breakfast, you would put cornflakes in there, instead of getting other items. So I'm just not using a variety of things. And I did have a video a while back, and I will go ahead and link it up here, where I talk about, I was looking through some of my yarns and really giving like a hard look and questioning if I should keep it or if I should give it to somebody else. And thankfully, I have a friend whose granddaughters are learning to crochet, so I was able to give them a couple big bags of great yarn, and they have put that to good use. But if you are kind of questioning some of the things in your stash, definitely check out that video, and maybe I can kind of help guide you a little bit there on what can go if you're a person who already has a yarn stash. But if you're starting that yarn stash from scratch, that was really hard to say. If you're starting your yarn stash from scratch, I would focus on really just getting the things you're going to use. And that would definitely come after that first point where I said, spend some time, figure out the projects that you want to do and that you enjoy doing, and just kind of go by the project until you've narrowed down what you like making. You do not need to have every type of yarn available to you. And part of that, and I did just kind of touch on it, but a mistake I made when I started building my yarn stash was when I would come across a yarn on clearance, like an astronomical price, if it was normally $5 and I spent $1.25 on it, there would be yarns that didn't really speak to me, like different colors or textures, but I would think, a certain loved one in my life, they like this color, or, this person does this activity, so this would be a great yarn for that. A lot of times it kind of got to be where I had accidentally built up a good number of those yarns for other people in my stash, and I just wasn't motivated to use them because, number one, they weren't my favorite types of yarn, and number two, I didn't actually have a pattern in mind. I got the yarn first, thinking of the person, thinking, oh, I'll figure out what to do with it. And I was just never motivated to use those yarns. So I'm not saying, don't pick up yarns that, might be your daughter's favorite color or whatever, but just don't pick up all of them. Maybe here or there if it's a really great bargain and a really great deal and you think you'll enjoy working with it, but don't just pick up every purple yarn because that person loves purple. You're probably not going to make that many gifts for them. A big mistake I made when I started with my yarn stash, and I was definitely going to a lot of clearance sales, and I was looking at clearance yarn online, like at Hirschner's. The problem with this is I did not buy enough of any of those particular yarns to be able to use for stuff. There are only so many hats you can make, you know what I'm saying? And I love hats and I make a lot of hats, but even I can get to that point. If this yarn that you're looking at is on clearance because it's discontinued, the odds of finding it are very slim unless you're going to like a secondary market like eBay or Etsy or something and looking for a specific yarn that is discontinued. And chances are it's not going to be a good price when you find it because the person selling it isn't selling it because they're trying to desperately unload it. They're selling it because they know you are desperate to get that last skein or two to finish your blanket. So the price you could pay for that extra skein or two off of eBay and then the shipping to get it could very well negate all of the savings that you had from buying that yarn on clearance if you didn't get enough. For me, this more manifested in being in store at a clearance sale and there might only be 2 or 3 of that particular skein or that particular yarn and colorway on the shelf that was marked down. I either did not look at how much yardage was in there or I just didn't really think enough and just thought, oh, this is pretty. I love it. I'll grab these 3. There's 3 of them. And then not realizing like, oh, I'll have enough to make 1 hat and absolutely nothing else. And then I'll have this weird leftover amount. You really do need to take into consideration if it is worth buying it, if you can or cannot get enough of it. And sometimes you can totally fudge it a little bit. And if it is a yarn where I'm going to use Hobby Lobby as an example here. And I know a lot of people don't like shopping at Hobby Lobby, but a lot of people do. And I just think it's easy to use as an example. If they have their I love this yarn and they have a print and then they have solids, which they do because this is a huge line. And there is a print colorway that goes on clearance and you see 3 of them and you absolutely love them. What I would encourage you to do then is pick up those 3, but look at the other I love this yarns in like the solid colors and see what coordinates with that yarn so that you can mix and match those. They'll be the same thickness, they'll be the same softness, the same weight, the same washing instructions. All of that will be the same, but maybe that beautiful colorway of variegated or whatever it is can be the accent in that blanket or cardigan or whatever. And you can get the solids that while they're not on clearance, you can buy them on a sale week. Just go over there, take the variegated one that's on clearance, and if the other stuff isn't on sale that week, don't buy it, but hold it up and see which one matches. Take a picture of it on your phone or write it down so that when that yarn is on sale, you can go back and get it. I enjoy a great thrift haul. I enjoy looking for yarn in thrift stores because I just enjoy thrift stores and estate sales and all that type of stuff. That's fun for me. I love exploring for treasures, and I will occasionally here in my area, they'll have citywide garage sales where you can go to a town and, you know, there might be 30 garage sales on a given Saturday. And I have looked for yarn and bought yarn in these in both of those thrift stores and garage sales. And what I have found a lot of times in my area, I know my friend Mary at Slow Crochet has an absolutely fantastic thrift store near her where they have absolutely great high-end yarns, and she has done absolutely great there. In my area, we just don't. I don't want to say it's like a yarn desert, but there aren't really LYSs around here. It's big box stores, and they are still very few and far between. So a lot of the thrift stores and garage sales, you're just not gonna find those high-end yarns. You could find some Super Saver, you could find some from Hobby Lobby, you know, like basic stuff like that. But what I have found is, especially if it is a thrift store or something like that, generally speaking, the people marking the products don't know anything about yarn. They see a Hobby Lobby tag, not realizing that every other week it is on sale for 30% off. So they might mark it at 30% off of what the tag says, and that isn't a bargain at all when you can go to the store and get brand new skein of the exact same yarn for the same price. And while I've tried being careful about like sniffing the yarn, really feeling it, making sure it isn't like dirty or like sticky feeling or smoky smelling or pet smelling, you do occasionally like just not notice something. Maybe you just didn't have the opportunity, like it was bagged up too well, or you felt too awkward at that garage sale, like sniffing the skein of yarn right in front of the person who owned it, for whatever reason. And I have had the instance a couple times where I decided to throw out a skein of yarn that I had gotten pretty darn cheap because it was just too smelly or something like that. And I didn't want to risk putting that in my yarn stash, even trying to clean it. If you're able to pick up a skein of yarn for 50 cents, do I really want to go through the effort of trying to wash it and dry it and make sure all of that, on the off chance that you can get the smell off, who knows? I know some people have had good success with this, but you have to decide if that's worth it for you, or if you're willing to risk putting it with other yarn and risking that smell transference to that stuff. Along the lines of that, I work as a receptionist, and I work in a very small town, and a lot of people that come into the office I work in know I crochet because I show up like this, and they will give me yarn. They're cleaning out their mother's house or whatever. And I have gotten some good things of yarn for sure, but I have also gotten yarns that were very, very smelly, were very, very old, were very, very scratchy. You name it. And sometimes like the really, really smelly stuff, that's just out. But sometimes if it was like a scratchy yarn or something that there wasn't anything else wrong with, I've somehow felt a little bit obligated, like I needed to use that yarn. And that was definitely more of Shannon in the beginning of her crochet journey type of thing. I have really gotten now where I just have come to terms with myself and know myself a little bit better. And I know that if a yarn is really unpleasant to work with, it's just going to sit there forever. But I'd created a lot of initial stress by accepting these yarns into my yarn stash when they were a yarn I never would have purchased on my own. And then they're taking up a very limited space I have. I live in an old farmhouse and I have one small closet for my yarn. I will put a video up here. It was like my latest cleaning and organizing one. If you would like to see it, you can check that out here. And you'll see, like, I have a pretty, I'm fortunate in that I have a closet all to myself for just yarn, but it is small. So I can't afford to have yarns that I hate and probably will never use sitting there in the yarn stash. As I said, I have been building this yarn stash for quite a while, so I'm certainly not going to purge all the yarn I have, but I'm trying to make adjustments as I go and as I learn more about myself and what I like doing and what I don't. So what I've been focusing on is working on a color palette that I really love, building my yarn stash now based on that color palette. And I've got a video I will link, and it is about finding inspiration for a color palette. It's got some kind of low-tech and high-tech ways of finding color palettes, like inspiration if you don't already know the colors that you love and go together. From here on out, I know the bulk of my projects that I make are going to be for me or my house, and I know the colors that I feel the most comfortable in and that I enjoy working with and are pleasing to me. So I'm really working at buying yarn that really just fits into that color palette. And that's not to say I won't buy anything else, but I'm not going to be building up a stockpile of those other colors. So by having this yarn stash and building it on a certain color palette, I am guaranteed then that I'm going to have more yarn that coordinates. So if I don't have enough of a certain yarn, I have a greater chance of having yarn that will coordinate with it and match it. And that gives me a lot more freedom. So definitely stocking by using a color palette is what I'm going to be doing here on out. I know I don't need to clarify, but if I have a project that comes up and I need something else for, I will definitely buy it. Or if I want to make a hat for my husband, I'm not going to make him wear my pinky orange hat. Like, I'll use gray or black or blue, a color he enjoys. So I'm not limiting and saying I will only buy in that color palette, but the yarns that I want to stockpile and build my stash around are going to be from here on out in that color palette. And very similar to that, I would also suggest building your yarn stash on a certain weight of yarn that you really like the most. So a lot of that will depend on the projects you're making, of course, but if you like a lot of drapey shawls and scarves and projects like that, you might want to do like a 2-weight or 3-weight at the most, and there's really no reason for you to be stocking your yarn stash with chunky 6-weight yarn if that's just not something you use, because you won't be able to mix and match those together. You won't be able to walk to that yarn stash and pull out something easily that'll go. So color palette and yarn weight preferences, definitely hone those in if you're building your yarn stash from scratch. And I think you'll have a lot more success actually working through the yarns and pulling out ones from the stash instead of having your yarn stash sit there and then you still continuing to buy yarn. And one last tip that I have, which this one requires, just a few more seconds of planning, but I have been fooled multiple times by different yarns with names. And in a video I did fairly recently on purchasing yarn with a purpose, I had gotten some of these really pretty respuns right here. I absolutely love the colors of them, and the names were like very Shannon sounding names. Like one of these is Pheasant, Port I think is another one, and I got one that said Cranberry, and I was like, awesome, I am gonna love this. Like, I love that reddish cranberry color. And when I got it, it was like a bubblegum Bazooka Joe type of pink, and it was pretty for sure, but it definitely, and it did still kind of go, but it just wasn't one that I would pick, and I just knew immediately when I saw it. I have another yarn that I got on clearance at Hirschner's, and it is bright pink, and I definitely think I'll still be able to use it for a project. I've got something in mind, but if I were to have seen it in a store, I definitely would not have purchased it. What I'm encouraging you to do, because I'm now forcing myself to do this, if it's not something that's obvious that I haven't seen before, I am going to leave the Joann's app or Hirschner's or wherever, open another browser, type into Google the name of the yarn and the colorway and click on the images button and see what comes up, so you can see that yarn in different lighting and you can see how other people have photographed it, not just the manufacturers, just to get a little bit more information on it and see if it really is what you think it's going to be doing. So that takes 10 extra seconds, but I'm definitely going to be doing that on yarns that I'm not familiar with, just as like an insurance policy to make sure that I'm really getting what I like. One of the best tips that I have heard for dealing with your yarn stash would be to use some sort of inventory program. And there's a lot of them out there. And if you use one, I would love it if you would drop that in the comments. But for me, I haven't done this. But what I have done with my yarn stash to help build it and not be getting duplicate items is to store some of this yarn in clear totes and put it on some shelving where I can actually see what the yarn is. Because for me, if I can't see it, I forget that it exists. So I need to have clear visual confirmation of what is in there. I don't want to have to dig around. I don't want to have to look for it. I want to be able to see it. And that has helped me from getting duplicates. To help actually use some of those yarns in my yarn stash so that I have room to buy more, I have started a use first bin, and I will link that video for you if you're interested in seeing that, or I can summarize it here. It's just a bin of yarns that I want to use first, and that's also been extremely helpful because I've got it sitting out right in front of me so that when I come into this room, I can see that bin, and instead of wandering into my yarn stash and getting distracted by a bunch of pretty things that I love, I can say, oh, remember you wanted to use this stuff first. If you have any tips or tricks, I would love for you to leave them in the comments and let me know, like, what would you do different if you were starting your yarn stash today? Or if you are kind of stumped and you are building your yarn stash, I would love for you to leave those questions in and encourage anyone who has more experience with a yarn stash to answer those questions as well. Because the more we can get that going, I think the more helpful it'll be and people will save more money. No one likes admitting they've made a bunch of mistakes, but I have made them and I wanted to share them with you and let you know what I would do differently if I was starting my yarn stash today. Thank you so much for talking yarn with me. I'm excited to talk to you again soon. Bye.